I know we could go through a whole thing.
I know. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sophia Luisa's So Zoom In. I am so excited to be talking today with Michelle Ford, who is sharing some very valuable information that I believe everyone should know, no matter who you are, because it's out there and it's part of your right to know. And it's the kind of information that a lot of people have kind of blown off. They haven't really taken seriously just because they haven't invested the time to find out what is really going on. And I know this sounds so mysterious and I don't know what to call it. I don't know how do you say it. I like to say you offer a class. Michelle offers a free class on Zoom called Common Law 101. And I think it's every Thursday morning and people are invited to it. And what is this called? Is this called common law? Is it called, going back to your rights that were fought for, that blood spilled for, or how do we refer to this?
Yeah, that's the mystery question. Actually, all of those things that you just said are accurate. So it is common law, and for those people that don't know what common law is, it really is it's common sense, right? Think of it like that. It's common, everyday men and women, common people, being governed by the supreme law of the land, which is actually really, it's being governed by the 10 Commandments. But it's not a religious thing per se. It is, however, reclaiming your right to self-govern. We know, we're born and we're inherently, we're good. Like we're good, but we grow up being taught how to behave, how to be, and we're taught what right and wrong is. And mostly it has to do with registrations and fees and, behaving in a certain way to please authority and to please, one another. Anyone who's different is sort of like outcasted as being not one of us. You know what I mean? And so those things are all taught. Think about how it is for kids in school when they're, preschool, kindergarten. They're not dividing themselves by race or gender identity or, socioeconomic status or anything like that. They just inherently already collect together and play and like we can do that. We can be that loving to one another. The problem is we've been taught through generational lies and deceit that each other is the enemy. We're the enemy of one another, and it's about racial inequality. It's about lack of resources for one group of people versus the other. So it's always us against them against us. And all of that is a smokescreen. It's all a distraction from the real enemy, which at the end of the day is, this is a spiritual battle. And at the end of the day, there's only one enemy of all of us, and it's the dark forces. But who are the dark forces? Right? The dark forces are things like deceit and lies and fraud and deception. And well, that is deceit, but all of these things that are perpetuated upon us without us realizing that that's what's going on. And so like the first deceit that happened to Americans back, way back during the time of our founding fathers was this deception of, we went from being free, lawful Americans with our God-given unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the right to defend ourselves, the right to practice our own religions, the right to, parent our children the way that we felt the need to parent our children. And we were lawful. And sadly, what ended up happening was this corporate contract got signed. So we were really only a free nation for a few years. And then just over the generations, the slow boil has taken us away from our self-governing rightful, lawful authority of self-governance and all of those things I just talked about, and instead made us subservient to these corporate masters. That
Yeah. Well, it seems
that's
like
kind of a long way of saying it all, but but that's basically it.
it seems like more of this is coming more prominent with this ongoing pandemic, where we're having this huge division of, people who choose to get jabbed, who don't get jabbed, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. It's like there's this segregation that's happening in this name of, in what I believe is fear. And so I think that goes back to this corporation where people forget that we are sovereign. It's like God first, then man, woman, woman, man, and everything else below us, that we have to work in community. Well, I think anyway. So one thing that I thought was very interesting, when we have a birth certificate, that makes us a corporation. Now,
That's exactly right.
This is a wild concept. How do you wrap your head around it? I mean, because you grow up thinking, you go to work, you get married, you have kids, but all of a sudden it's like, you're a corporation? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it is kind of, I think 90% of this movement is wrapping your brain around the actual truth of the matter. Because at the end of the day, everything is contract. And what I mean by that is our words create contract. Paper creates contract. So when we're born free. Well, actually, for people who are born of parents that have a marriage license, inherently they're not born free, because that marriage, if there's a license involved, the ceremonial aspect is the two uniting in marriage. But the license is actually each individual, which by the way is a corporate fiction word, individual. So the man and the woman, okay, when they fill out the marriage license paperwork, they're actually marrying the state. And so it becomes their marriage and all of the products of their marriage, all property. And that includes, real estate, financial assets, retirement accounts, everything that is the fruit of that marriage, including children, become the property of the state under the guise of this marriage license. So when children are born, most of them are born in hospitals or some sort of otherwise medical center of sorts, where they're birthed and they're assisted by a doctor. Well, a doctor is someone who has a license to make sure that that baby is born, into the world safely, etc. But they have a job to do, which is to get that child contractually obligated to the state as quickly as possible. So now the doctor might not be the one accountable per se for entering the child into this contract, but what happens is the parents are presented with a birth certificate application at the time of birth, right?
Right.
And the doctor, being being the witness of the birth, alongside with at least one of the parents, signs the birth certificate application. Well, that application is a contract where now the child, being the fruit of the marriage, right, or the fruit of the relationship, that child, by virtue of the birth certificate, officially becomes property of the state. And that's why private organizations like Child Protective Services, a government contractor, that's why they then have jurisdiction over children. So if a parent gets accused of some sort of awful abuse, oh, you don't want to vaccinate your child on schedule, you could be accused of neglect or any number of other offenses that this corporate fiction claims is offensive to the real parent, which is the state.
Wouldn't the argument be that by doing this, that everyone's quote taken care of, that if you are part of this, that you're part of a community, you're part of, you'll never be alone, you'll always be taken care of. Is that part of it, or do people see it that way and they don't?
Actually, yes, many people do see it that way, and they're really committed to making sure that they get to keep their benefits and privileges. Part of the great deception is that benefits and privileges somehow enhance our lives in a way that's greater than God-given unalienable rights. So rights are actually bigger, broader, more dynamic than benefits and privileges. Benefits and privileges are a coercive measure. In fact, some people are so fearful of losing benefits or privileges that they would prefer to stay as slaves. Right. I'll talk about slaves in a second, but they would prefer to be slaves than be free because they're afraid. I had a conversation recently where we were talking about debt slavery and taxation. Yeah. And the individual, I can call him an individual because he's still a citizen. But so this gentleman said, well, if I don't have property taxes anymore, then who's going to collect my trash? And I found that really interesting that was the concern. It's like, wait a minute, you'd rather trade your freedom for trash collection. It's interesting what is in the mind of different people, because for some it's, well, if I don't pay taxes, then what's going to happen to the roads? That's a really popular one. The other one is, if I'm free, what's going to happen to my Social Security? Am I ever going to get my Social Security? So these are really common questions and concerns that come up when this conversation is brought to people that are new to the conversation. But I can tell you this about benefits and privileges. In a nutshell, if it's something that you've paid into and or your employer has paid into it for you, those benefits and privileges still belong to you. They don't disappear. But when that birth certificate gets created and you become a citizen of the United States of America, or the United States of America, USA Inc., that piece of paper is it'll be like a piece of paper with your name on it. And this is a representative of you. This piece of paper isn't you. And that's one of the hardest things for people to grasp, because we're so used to seeing our name on something and then believing that that's us. Right. But there's a distinct difference between this flesh and blood and this piece of paper. So this piece of paper, by congressional definition, is a person, is a citizen, is an individual, is a corporation. All of those corporate fictional terms relate to the inanimate object with an all caps name. So go ahead.
I'm starting to understand this a little bit, but it's a very abstract thought, and we've been living in this very abstract concept of life, especially in this country. So say we have our birth certificate and we want out of the system. We want to claim our sovereignty. We want to say, okay, I'm no longer a servant to the USA Inc. I turn in my birth certificate. I say, you don't owe me anymore. You're not going to trade me on the stock market. I claim back my energy. What happens next? Because you go through all this paperwork to do this, to get out of the paperwork, which is kind of ironic, but then what happens? Because I was talking to a friend about this, and she's like, well, then what happens? It's like such a weird concept. It's, how are you out? How does that work? What happens to your life afterwards?
It's so great. Well, gosh, where do I start? Because I feel like there's so much that I could say about this. So because we've never been free, truly, we've always believed we're free because that's what we're taught in school. We're taught we're in the freest country. We are free Americans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we already believe and operate that we're free. So that part is easy. Now we just get to align the paperwork with what you already know about yourself so that the contract matches your belief system, right? Because right now we already have a belief that we're free. We already have a belief that we're the supreme law of the land applies to us because that's what we're taught in school, right? So
it doesn't.
It's just, but it doesn't.
Right.
That's why they can take away your kids, right? That's why they can pull you over on the side of the road and they can arrest you. That's why it's your word against theirs. We're taught that we're innocent until proven guilty, right? That's what we're taught.
Right.
That we have the right to remain silent. Really? Try that with a police officer. Try not answering questions of a police officer and see what happens, right? So we're taught something, but then in reality, that's not what's happening. And so what we're helping people to do is to bring their belief system in alignment with the paperwork, because that paperwork, with the birth certificate that we talked about earlier, it gets filed with the county registrar, which is a registration office. And at the registration office, that's where all property is filed. So that should be the first red flag for men and women, that is a problem. Why is my body registered in the same place that my house is registered? Right? It's just red flag. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, there's a recorder. See, in the de facto system, it's called registration. And de facto meaning like it's what we see is going on, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's lawful. So that's de facto. And then lawful is de jure. I like to say de jure for sure, baby. De jure for sure. That's how you remember which one you want. Lawful. So what we do is we help people to correct their status by putting their paperwork in the lawful system. Now, by itself, the only thing that does is it's called getting you on the land. Because right now, when you're a citizen and you have a de facto relationship to yourself, you're this, you don't have ownership of it, the state does. Well, we get the paperwork into the right system in the recorder. So there's registration or recording. So we, instead of being in the registrar's office, you're going to be in the recorder's office. Okay. It's just semantics, but it matters because paper is the difference between owning the property or not. Paper is the difference between being married or not. Paper is the difference between buying a car or not, so paper matters. Contracts do matter. They affect your life. So we want to make sure your contract is in the right jurisdiction. So then once that happens, all those other contracts that you, aside from your American self, like when you become lawfully American, aside from that, there's a ton of other contracts that you're in that you might not realize are contracts. I mean, the famous ones of late are apps on your phone that, you hear about a new app, you want to get the app, you download the app. It's got 160 pages of disclosures, but you just click accept because you want the app. So by tacit agreement, you didn't read all of it, but you really want to be able to use that scanner app, let's say. So you didn't read the fine print, but those are terms and conditions that you're agreeing to.
Yeah.
And so that they get you in all these little ways that you have no idea what you're necessarily getting yourself into. It's like that with credit cards. It's like that when you go, you take yourself or your child to urgent care and they have you sign that little electronic signature pad, right? You don't totally know what you're signing. All these digital signatures, they just say click accept and then sign. And most people just want to get it over with.
Right.
But there's a string of agreements that you are in that you may not necessarily want to be in anymore when you're a free American, because then you've got your life in two jurisdictions. You're attempting to operate as a free American, yet you've got some contracts that keep you in this de facto system. So,
but then, I mean, so if you're out of the system and you have to go to the hospital, or you have to, have a credit card, or you have to do something that you have to sign off on, how does that affect you if you're out of the system? Is that something you still do, or do you go around it, or what can you do?
well, the good news is once you know who you are and you do the proper paperwork, then you own your corporate fiction name, your all caps name that appears on your driver's license. So you don't disappear from the de facto world when you claim your political status. That doesn't happen. But opportunities for correcting things do start showing up in your world. Now, I know I need a credit card once in a while, so I didn't cancel that contract. Right? I know I need a credit card once in a while, so I keep a credit card. And my credit card has all capital names. My credit card statement comes in all capital name. As a woman of integrity, I'm going to pay my bills, right? I'm going to still operate and pay my bills. So I'm not going to get myself into crazy debt. However, there is this whole other side of it that's way too complicated for me, and I'm not totally there yet. I'll have to come back and talk to you maybe in a year once I've got it under my belt. But there's this lovely thing called birthright, that when you reclaim your lawful man or woman self, right?
Right, your sovereignty of self, yeah.
Yeah. You are allowed to then participate in some of your birthright money that's sitting there in a Sestiki trust. I don't know how to say it right. But there's this trust that exists. It really actually started way, way, way back, I think in the 1300s,
right,
where the Pope became the trustee. God was the trustor. God gave us this earth with all these minerals and all of these herbs and all this food and all these resources. And then mankind came along and started pillaging and taking these minerals, taking the gold, taking everything and putting a monetary value on everything, right? But then things like the Black Plague came along and all these people got wiped out. Well, what happened to all their wealth? Well, the Pope became the trustee, which is the trustee is accountable for making sure that wealth, all those assets, land, gold, jewels, whatever, all of that gets preserved for the beneficiaries. Well, we've had centuries of people who, because remember, before America, they escaped all of that taxation and all of those problems. They came to this land and they declared themselves free, and it was the first time that I know of in our history where there was this declaration of freedom against the forces of taxation and debt slavery. Okay. So there's been generational theft going on of the assets and, property and gold and money, for generations of millions of people over the millennia, right? There's been generations of people that got their taxes taken from them, all these assets taken from them, all of this accumulated wealth. And I'm talking about trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars. It's like trillions of trillions.
So there'd be no poverty anywhere.
Correct.
There's that much money. So no one
would owe anything. And for anyone who might be watching that's biblically minded, you might remember that in the Bible, they talk about Jubilee. You know, it was before there was this trust system set up, there was Jubilee. And Jubilee is a time when I don't know if it was every 7 years or something like that, but all debts would be forgiven. All debts would be forgiven. Rightful owners of things would, you know, get their stuff back, right? And it was a Jubilee. And then they would just kind of start over again. The Great Reset, if you will. But we haven't had that since this trust system was set up. And that generations of beneficiaries have not been getting their birthright. So there's accumulated wealth, and the Catholic Church, the Pope, essentially is accountable for the wealth of the world that's been being generationally accumulated for over 1,000 years. So, or about 1,000 years.
But there's rumors the Pope is bankrupt and that the church has no money and lies, more lies.
Well, I have been hearing rumors that they are now distributing the money back to the rightful beneficiaries. And so, however, when you're a citizen, you can't be a beneficiary of that because you're a corporate fiction. Right? So
realize that.
You've got to claim who you are. You can't be a corporate debt slave where you're this
instead of this.
You know, the laws say things like all persons, citizens, residents, individuals must fill in the blank, right? Must get a vaccine or must pay taxes or whatever. But when you realize the definition of those is this, you can't vaccinate a piece of paper. A piece of paper can't pay its own taxes. But when we see our name on it, we go, oh, that's my responsibility.
It's not.
And it is. If it's all caps, you know, and you're operating in that realm, that technically that is your responsibility, because guess what? They can come and arrest you if you don't fulfill your obligations.
And we let that happen. So say we say, okay, I claim my sovereignty. I'm not part of this fictional corporation anymore. I am, skin and bones, me. I'm Sophia. I'm out of the system. I want to claim my birthright, from generations. How would I go about doing that? Because I know once people find out there's like all this money that's for everyone who claimed their sovereignty, like in the Bible, know thyself. I can't.
That's right.
I keep hearing this over and over again. So the synchronicity of this is just like giving me chills. So you claim who you are. You know yourself. You know what you want, your truth. How do you go about saying, okay, how do I claim my birthright? How does that happen? Or is that another huge obstacle to go through?
Well, it's interesting because I know that there are many different very smart people working on this at the same time. So there's not like one perfect right way to do it.
Right.
My understanding also, like in addition to that, is that they can't just let the money go all at once into the hands of all of these people who claim reclaim themselves into the proper political status and jurisdiction. Because if they did, then it would just devalue the currency. Nothing would be worth anything.
Right. And
we would end up in a major, crisis, a financial crisis, because nothing would be worth anything. And then it would cause massive inflation. We think it's expensive right now to buy a house, you could buy a condo for $1 million in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah.
Well, that same condo might be worth $100 million if they released all the money. So I believe what the plan is, from my rudimentary understanding of this part, the financial part of it, is that, when you go through all the steps, because you can't just suddenly go hog wild and start behaving like a free American when the environment isn't set yet. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. But when you get to a certain point of undoing certain contracts and getting yourself free, then you can opt into the banking in the free world. And when you do that, you're given it like a debit card, right? So we know how a debit card works is there's money in the account and you withdraw it. You pay for groceries, you pay for your electric bill, whatever, right? With your debit card.
Right.
So my understanding is that debit card will give you access to your trust money. So you're the beneficiary, and the debit card that you get once you're free and all these other things are undone, you're going to have access to that trust money that you've been promised in the birthright situation.
It is a process. I mean, it's not something that happens overnight. So there's a lot of paperwork. So people really need to start informing themselves. Really. So what is offered right now, which I think is absolutely incredible, is this town hall meeting, which is weekly. That is free. Now, is that open to everyone who's interested? Or, I mean, because I know there's some, I hate to say this, some crazies who say, no, this is, conspiracy theorists, or it's not true, or, try to hide it, try to, keep that away from, like they say, knowledge is power. And there's some people who don't want other people to know that knowledge because they don't want them to be empowered. So for something like the town hall, is it something that can be shareable, or is it by meeting, or?
Yeah. And so it's really important for people to know, first and foremost, that our Congress in the 90s ratified an international covenant called the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And one of the things that it says in there on the, right there on the page, right after the cover page, that people have the right to correct their political status. So I'm not saying that that's a verbatim way that they said it, but it's right there. People have the right to fix their status once they figure it out. So that's first and foremost. And our Congress ratified that in the early 90s. So our country, our de facto government, the corporate government, recognizes that people have the right to fix their status if they figure this out. Now, of course, there's going to be dark forces that do not want people to be free. Can you imagine? I mean, just think about it for a minute. If you were in charge and you had a nation allegedly 360 million people, of which let's say 50% are taxpayers, because there's also people that don't pay taxes anymore, or there's special needs or whatever like that, right? So people under the age of majority. So all these people are paying into this system who have no idea that they have access to this trust fund, who are paying registration fees, licensing fees, they're paying taxes, they're paying rent to live on the land of homes that they bought when they bought real estate. Real estate is just the top 6 inches of land. So people are paying rent on properties they thought they owned, and that rent is called property tax. Imagine if you were the one getting all that money and distributing it, to your buddies that help you to keep the veil over the eyes of innocent men and women, right? You wouldn't want that to stop. You would not want that system to stop. The tune of trillions of dollars a year getting siphoned right out of the pockets of people willingly and voluntarily paying these debts. And, you might be pretty upset too. You might even set up a whole department to help condition the minds of people to stop themselves, get people Wakefielded. I like to say, Dr. Andy Wakefield was in the medical freedom, or is in the medical freedom movement, but he was one of the first people to recognize, that vaccines were harming children. And he was immediately outcasted, right? And discredited. He got his license taken away. Whoa, so he was one of the first free men, because when they strip you of benefits and privileges, there's no other choice but to be, you're free by default, And so, sorry, I went on a little tangent there, but my point is, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're using media, education tools, political tools, all the levers possible to squash this movement and to have harmed the early adopters who were figuring it out. You can't let you can't let the crazies off the farm, the human farm, it's a slavery system, and they don't want their slaves to escape.
What is so great is that we are using social media to spread this word, and so no matter who tries to quash it, there's always going to be someone who tries to get through, especially with word of mouth. Because I know it was a friend of mine who found out about the town hall, who led me to it. And then when I found out about your weekly class too, which you also have opened to the public for free, which is just invaluable. So, I mean, I think the more of us who want to speak up, especially now when everything's all about quashing the truth.
Right.
So I think this is all the more important, especially I get so angry when I see children in schoolyards wearing masks, staying 6 feet apart, running around. And then you have parents say, oh, but my child's going to get sick and die. I'm like, no, your child is healthy and is outside and is in nature, and they have an immune system that will fight off against it. But there's this innate fear that everything is going to be taken away and you're going to die, and oh my God, when we can just go back to the truth and have that and know that we have these rights. I didn't know. I remember I was being raised by my grandfather saying, all there is to life is pay taxes and you die. He was very simple about it, but that was his mindset. And now it's like we have freedoms, to actually live life. Okay, granted, integrity, being respectful, kindness, compassion, all of that goes into, but I think these are things that we need to come back to. So what you're doing is so incredibly valuable, Michelle. And I want people to know about this. I want people to know about your classes. Can I post your weekly class on the link for this when I post on my—
Absolutely, sure. Yeah. It's open to everybody all over the country, because I believe that God wants people to know this information so that they have a choice of whether or not to be free.
And figure out. And then I think the more of us who come together and start knowing what this is, we can start figuring out, okay, what exactly does being free mean for me? I mean, so I'm out of the system. Now what? And I think that's kind of scary to a lot of people because there's now this big unknown,
Right.
And, for generations, we've had birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, driver's licenses even. And when you take that away, you're like, now what?
Yeah, it's so interesting because it really is just about being educated on the difference, because everything is semantics, everything is jurisdiction, which is right words. So I'll use the driver's license as an example. So many people are unaware that you have the right to freely travel. You have the right to freely travel. If you're going from point A to point B and you've got your mode of transportation, meaning it belongs to you, that whether it's your bicycle, your moped, your automobile, you have the right to freely travel. However, driving, notice the difference in words, driving is a privilege. And we learn that when we go to driver's training class, right? When we're 16, 17, 18 years old, right? So they teach us this new word. They teach us the word that relates to having to pay for it. Right. So you're indoctrinated. Oh, to drive, I must get a license. It's a privilege. So it's programming. You're allowed to travel, which is exactly the same thing as getting behind the wheel of this motorized thing we call a vehicle or a car. but it's an automated mobile. So it's an automobile, and traveling doesn't require licensure. So you still, the things that you've been doing and knowing and loving don't disappear. You just get re-educated into the proper terminology. And you stop having to pay for all that stuff when you undo the contracts in the right order.
Right.
Right. So driving, just I'll wrap up, because like, who would want to drive then if everyone can just travel? Right. Well, wait, if it's free and I wouldn't have to need a license, then why wouldn't just everybody do that? Don't licenses pay for the roads? So here's the distinction. Driving and needing a license is a corporate and commercial endeavor. So let's say you drive a Lyft or Uber, or you drive a delivery truck, okay, or you drive for the post office, let's say, right? You're acting in the capacity of a commercial venture, whether it's your own commerce or you work for someone and you're helping them, their business engaging in this commerce, then you do need a license to drive, because driving inherently, by definition, is a commercial venture. It's a commercial activity. So the other thing that's important to note is that insurance companies, for car insurance, an insured person, remember, person is a corporate fiction. Okay. So an insured person is a individual, which is also a corporate fiction, who is driving with a license. So they will only cover liabilities. Like, let's say you accidentally rear end somebody, right? Your insurance is only going to cover you if you are driving with a license. So insurance companies are not telling you this whole thing about the commerce and all of that. But at the end of the day, if you want to be able to maintain insurance in case you hurt someone and you want those bills to be paid, Michelle says you might want to keep that license because you might need that insurance in case you hit somebody, right? So you can be in the jurisdiction when you want to be, or not be in the jurisdiction when you don't want to be. But
okay, so I can see that's happening because it seems like everything's like together, and then you're like slowly separating. And I think when enough people separate, and then they kind of come up with their own ways of doing things, then that kind of all shifts, right?
Yes.
And then we have to be careful of like people not being overly greedy and people being, fair and have that equity going. And so,
Yes.
it sounds like a really long process, but it's, just this concept of claiming your own sovereignty, it's like, wow, that's like, I think for people to start thinking about that is the first step.
It is. Yeah, because that you can't do anything else. Hold on. Let me say that another way. Because really, if you wanted to cancel your credit card, you can. So I don't mean it like that. You can undo contracts all the time. Okay. But it won't amount to much of a difference if you're still a slave on paper.
Right.
And if there's an authority over you that's other than God, then you have a problem.
And we're letting that happen with even just this pandemic. We're letting people tell us how to live our lives. And I think I would think people are getting really angry about this. I know I am, but there's still so many people in such a huge amount of fear because they're not claiming their truth. They're not knowing who they are.
They don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a great book. I really want to recommend that people go get this book through your favorite book seller. One of my favorites now is Books Inc. I used to think I had to get everything on Amazon or Barnes and
No,
Noble.
do not.
But yeah, but I've since learned, to support smaller family-owned, small bookstores. It's booksinc.com. So I love getting stuff at Books Inc. Anyway, the book is titled "You Know Something Is Wrong When," and then it's got like 5 little ellipses, and it's by Anna Maria Reisinger, and it's Reizinger. And had I read that book in 2015, when I was first starting to wake up to the fact that the Constitution was like missing in action, I was, losing my parental rights to this horrible bill in California called SB 277. And it had me like hungry for what the heck just happened. How do these people have rights over me? I don't understand. What happened to unalienable God-given rights?
Right.
What happened to the supreme law of the land? Because I was indoctrinated in school to have a certain belief system, but it was not active for me. So that's when I went on the hunt. I could have saved myself 6 years of researching and reading really lengthy, way too detailed books. I could have saved myself all that time had I read that book first. If I read that book first, which gives sort of the big picture,
right,
then I could have gone to research to confirm and find the resources to support the author's assertions, but I did it backwards. I did the minutia first, and there were so many different authors, and it was all a broad range of digging in all these different places, trying to get to the source of the truth. And so by the time I figured almost everything out, I was like, oh gosh, I can't do that, because everyone who's tried it has gone to jail or has had their assets stolen from them from the corporation, right? And I'm like, well, I can't do that. I don't want to lose everything I've worked so hard for my whole life. This isn't going to work. Right. So I knew that there was a problem. I just didn't know how to fix it. So the answer is, not only do you need to correct your political status, but then you need to actively support building the assembly in your county. And an assembly is people with your same political status.
Right.
So you need to be in your county, and you need to find your like-minded people, and you need to help them get educated enough to get papered up and get them onto the land so that their governing document is the supreme law of the land. And then you can have interim positions to build your jural assembly, which is the first step towards self-governing and creating a government of the people, by the people, for the people, really, because it's only people, like actual living people, not these ones, but these ones. This is a government of the people, okay? This is a government of the fiction. But we're creating a government of the people again.
That's exciting.
It's exciting, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's the one thing that was missing for the early adopters. They were the ones that figured it out, did 2 things wrong, okay? They didn't correct their political status. Right? So they were behaving free. Once they found out they were a corporate fiction, they thought it was just mental. Oh, I was a corporate fiction and I'm not anymore. I'm free. Well, yeah, you need that first.
Right.
But then you need to actually create the contract.
Right. And put the people in the system.
Put it in paper, free yourself, right? Marry God instead of instead of your county. Okay. Then after you do that, then you need to build your county with other like-minded people and build your jural assembly. So a jural assembly is the first step out of 4 parts to build your local government of the people. So that you need a county recorder, which if you're the first one on your county to do this, there are trainings to become a common law notary. And that's what a recorder is. It's a recording secretary that can record you in the common law system. right? Remember earlier we talked about registrations versus recording. So the common law notary, you get yourself trained and you become a common law notary. Okay. Then you find your like-minded people and you teach them how to do the same. So once you're recorded, then you need to get published in the common law system. Do the same thing with your friends and family, get them on the land. So you need a recorder, you need a treasurer, you need a court clerk, you need a sheriff, you need a bondsman, you need a marshal at arms, you need a justice, you need 29 jurors, and you need, did I already say marshal at arms? 29 jurors, and you need the peacekeeping task force. Altogether, it's about 40 people.
Wow.
I think it's like less than 40 people.
It's not very many.
So if you can do that, you just formed an interim, which you need an interim until you have enough people for an actual election. Okay. You have an interim group of volunteers that say, I'm going to be accountable for doing this with my like-minded local people, the ones that are actually declared as people again. Okay. Men and women. Then once you got that, then you can create the next leg, which is building the peacekeeping task force so that everyone understands survival skills, how to maintain peace in your neighborhood, where are the food resources in case of a food shortage, how do we share, things like batteries, or how do we communicate if the power grid goes down, right? So you build all the survival skills in case the de facto gets mad enough that they shut everything down, which they probably will at some point, honestly. Right? They're not allowed to jail us anymore. So they're going to do other things to take away and coerce us back onto the farm.
Right.
Well,
I think that's why it's so important to have these town hall meetings, because this is stuff that you cover, right? You cover all the different steps on how to do it. And you guys have a goal right now of every county in California reaching the assembly status, right?
Yeah. The goal is to have 2/3 of the counties to do exactly what I just described and get a jural assembly. That's your common law court. Get your common law court formed. Again, it's about 40 people so that we can get to at least 2/3 of the counties on California to do that by November so that we can actually hold an election.
Wow.
And begin our self-governing process of growing up. We've been in the infancy stage as dependents of the cabal. That terminology.
I know.
We've been corporate fictions for so long. We haven't been free men and women for 160 years.
Yeah, and so, people are going to have a hard time with that concept because I think with these weekly meetings and your class, it's going to help people grasp that concept. I hate to cut. I feel we can talk for hours about this, Michelle.
We can.
And,
we can always have another one because I know we got to wrap it up. But
I would love to do that, and I would love to be able to share the information for the town hall meetings on Wednesday nights and for your class on Thursday mornings, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, please do.
And I think this is something that people need to start thinking about, start questioning. I know you guys are offering, you're not charging anything. You are doing this out of your own time, your own passion for it, to share this information. So I think that's incredible. And I'm so excited that you're doing this. And I want to be able to help spread this word.
Thank you.
My daughter keeps giving me these signs that it's time to go, Mom.
She's like, yeah, Mom, I'm giving you the hook. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I'm so sorry, but I would love to continue this conversation with you. I will reach out and see when we can do this again, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. I'm happy to help educate people.
There's just so much. I know people are going to come out with so many questions, and I want people to feel that whatever questions they have, it can be answered, and it's a process, but we can do this. And it's important that we do this.
Yeah, please do share about my Thursday morning. You know, I have a Thursday morning Zoom from 9 to 10. Sometimes it goes over because of the Q&A, which is totally fine.
Right.
And that's Pacific time. And then Wednesday nights, starting at 7 o'clock every week, we have an open forum town hall. So regardless of where you are on your journey, whether you're just finding out about this or you're a seasoned, you know, American, you've been doing this for a long time, please, we want you on the call. I get so much out of listening to the questions and having, like, I call, you know, the elders, the mentors that are on these calls that help us to all get kind of caught up. It's great. And it's a movement of love and peacekeeping at the end of the day.
It is time. It's definitely time. So thank you so very much, Michelle. I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, Sophia. Take good care. Talk to you soon. Bye.